So my name is Kim Anderson, and I'm the Director of Member Mobilization here at the Evangelical Environmental Network. And I'm super excited about this event because it's a kickoff for the summer and focusing on ways that we can take advocacy. And really, we just take this opportunity to train you on not only issues that are facing the United States, people all over the country, as well as ways that you can take action. I actually was just having a conversation earlier today about how sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed. And I personally feel better when I'm taking action rather than just sitting back and being frustrated about the way things are. So to me, this is a very exciting opportunity. And a couple of years ago, if you're a beginner, it was exactly where you were. I felt I had no idea what kinds of advocacy to take or how to do it. So, and I feel like I'm more of an intermediate/advanced now. So I'm excited to see people from all different levels of, how you feel about that right now. So before we get started, I'll go ahead and pray. So if you want to join me in prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for this time. And we just pray that you will honor it and that you will help us to hear the things you want us to hear and take the actions that you want us to take, and just guide us over the next few months as we focus on action, and we do all of this for your glory. It's your name we pray. Amen. Now, if you could go one more slide for me, please. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Jessica Mormon, who's going to introduce us a little bit and give us some guiding principles and some focus, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Kim. And again, thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from or watching on demand offline. It is my pleasure to have you join us on EEN's Summer of Action Kickoff today. If you don't know me, my name is Jessica Mormon. I serve as president and CEO of the Evangelical Environmental Network. And our mission here at EEN is to come alongside our fellow evangelicals to rediscover and reclaim our biblical mandate to care well for God's creation and to ensure that all of God's children have a healthy environment and safe climate to thrive in. Now, when it comes to looking at what actions we take, we have a few guiding principles here at EEN, but it essentially can be boiled down into what does it look like to live out the picture of Matthew 22 and Matthew 25 in our day and age. And so Matthew 22 is where Jesus gives us his greatest commandment to love God and to love our neighbors as ourselves. In this age of climate change, pollution, biodiversity crises, what does it look like to love our neighbors in the midst of that? Matthew 25, our call to give special care to the least of these. And that term, the least of these, means those that have been overlooked, who've been underserved. And so these verses underpin what we do here at EEN, being rooted in scripture, guided by science, and always working towards that redemptive action so that everyone can have that abundant life that Jesus promises, that he says he came to give in John 10:10. And so when we look at that, that lens of what actions we can take together, we're looking at, is it fair? Is it just? Does it avoid danger? And so we're excited today to partner with you in living out this important aspect of our faith through the lens of creation care and climate action. And if you go to the next slide, this is what we kind of boiled down our pillars for action of looking at, also at the very center of it, defending the health and life of people, our families, our communities, our children, those who are most vulnerable. We know climate impacts the most vulnerable people here at home and across the world first and worst. How can we live out this in our faith of coming alongside folks to defend life and protect the health of people? At the same time, we protect God's creation in the midst of that at the same time. And then also, as we look at different climate and pollution action, we have the opportunity to create new family sustaining careers in the clean economy. This is what I call the win-win-wins of climate and pollution solutions, of climate and pollution action. And this is what we're going to be journeying together today, but across the course of the summer, of discovering how we can each participate in advancing all three and so many other benefits that come from these solutions. And so today, I also have the distinct honor of introducing you to our keynote speaker today, whose work really hits on all three of these points, but especially that center point of helping people. We have with us today Assistant Administrator for Resilience Strategy at FEMA, Samantha Medlock. As you may know, FEMA's mission is to help people before, during, and after disasters, which unfortunately are becoming more extreme and frequent due to climate change. And I know even this season, Ms. Medlock has already been busy addressing many disasters that have faced communities and families across our country. FEMA's Office of Resilience, of which Ms. Medlock is the assistant administrator of, their mission is to prepare communities, reduce suffering, and speed recovery. And she oversees the policy, doctrine, strategy, and evaluation efforts for the entire FEMA Resilience organization to meet this mission, which includes risk information, planning and capacity building, federal insurance, and risk reduction investments. Now, I had the personal pleasure of meeting and working with Ms. Medlock in her prior role as senior counsel to the House of Representatives Select Committee on the Climate Crisis in the 116th and 117th Congresses. And I have to say, the Select Committee played a pivotal role in crafting and advancing policy provisions that went into the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest national investment in climate and clean energy to date. And Ms. Medlock, her work, she led on the resilience, adaptation, and preparedness efforts of the committee's portfolio, including science, public health, infrastructure, housing, finance, national security portfolios. Ms. Medlock is a true expert in all of these areas, and it was a real honor to work with her and the committee to host faith leaders roundtables that brought together bipartisan members of the committee. And also Ian had the honor of testifying before the committee as well. And so again, I could go on about Ms. Medlock's extensive and distinguished career as a former White House Deputy Director for the Council on Environmental Quality. She is the recipient of the Army Commander's Award for Public Service for her service after Hurricane Katrina. She is an expert in climate risk management, resilience, federal flood policy, insurance, and finance. I could go on, but I'd love for you to hear from Ms. Medlock herself. Ms. Medlock, thank you for your leadership, for stepping into the lives and communities of people at their time of greatest need. And it's a true honor to have you join our community today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that incredibly gracious introduction. It's such an honor to be with you all this afternoon or this morning, depending on your geography. But what a privilege to have the opportunity also to continue this relationship that we have built through a number of activities, noting, of course, the work with the House Select Committee and now the work with DHS and FEMA. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to help kick off your summer of action and to give you all an update of the work that we've been leading here at FEMA as part of our year of resilience. It is through partnerships like these that we know that we are strengthening the fabric of communities and helping to prepare them for the changes that we know are no longer able to be avoided due to the climate crisis, and for the events that we see unfolding. It is already, I'm afraid, a busy storm season for the spring, and forecast for, unfortunately, a busier tropical cyclone season We know that extreme heat is already playing a role, and it's not even quite June. And we know that we're in for another busy wildfire season. So across the range of threats and hazards that we contend with, it is with the partnerships with communities of faith and houses of worship and community leaders that we know our nation is better prepared, and we're able also to be better partners with our allies around the world in working to address the humanitarian and natural resource impacts of extreme weather and climate. Resilience is about the ability to prepare for threats and hazards, to adapt to changing conditions, and to withstand and recover rapidly from adverse conditions and disruptions. Our programs focus on increasing disaster resilience for all by deepening the nation's understanding of risk, preparing the whole community for the full range of hazards, natural and anthropogenic, and investing in resilience through risk reduction, through adaptation and recovery projects, and transferring risk even through insurance. But without addressing the needs of our most vulnerable populations, neither the communities nor the systems that they depend on are really able to survive, to adapt, and importantly, to thrive in the face of these increasing shocks and stresses. So our approach is about promoting equitable and resilient outcomes for all. We know that social connectedness plays a critical role in communities' preparedness and resilience to all hazards. So neighborhoods and communities where individuals are connected to one another and to community institutions such as service organizations, religious groups, community-based organizations, those communities are able to respond more effectively and recover more quickly from disasters with less humanitarian impact and human suffering. So expanding partnerships with faith-based and community organizations enhances collective action, and it bolsters preparedness actions in communities. Serving as trusted sources of information and services, these organizations across the board help to address the most pressing needs for communities. So for us in the emergency management community, by engaging with faith-based and community organizations, emergency managers are collaborating to be partners to address whole community preparedness, response, and recovery efforts. We know that faith-based and community organizations play a crucial role in providing support during and after emergency events. We see this unfolding in real time across the nation in the events that have occurred even just this week and those that are ongoing. But there are also real opportunities for emergency managers and faith-based organizations and people of faith to be partners in enhancing overall community preparedness and resilience before the event. So these opportunities to build relationships, to understand missions, to identify risks and prepare mitigation and response strategies in advance are critical. So organizations can also serve diverse segments of the population every day, including our elders, children, people with disabilities, people who face barriers to accessing essential services like transportation, folks with limited English proficiency or low literacy levels, individuals that are experiencing food or housing insecurity or homelessness, or low-income populations broadly. The relationships that communities of faith have to support those vulnerable populations are also really essential in terms of developing resilience and making sure that we have that horizontal integration across communities and we're strengthening social cohesion. We also know that houses of worship and communities and people of faith are essential in planning and preparedness efforts to engage in the more comprehensive and effective approaches. Who knows better, right? Where a community's strengths are, where a community's vulnerabilities and risks are, and the opportunity to foster that community cohesion toward long-term resilience is essential. So as communities continue to experience the kinds of known and emerging stressors, it's critical that emergency managers continue to include the unique strengths and resources offered by faith-based and community organizations. We at FEMA are committed to instilling equity by increasing all hazards resilience in our nation's most at-risk and underserved and disadvantaged communities. So we're taking a place-based approach to identify those high-risk, disadvantaged communities, and I want to show you a little bit about that work. If I might take a moment to share some information. Let's see, it's going to be this one. There we go. How does that look? Is that coming through for you all? Great. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. So one of the ways that we're going about this place-based work is through legislation that was signed into law in 2022, the Community Disaster Resilience Zones Act. What this act does is direct FEMA to develop tools around identifying risk and to designate zones that are census tracts that are among our most at-risk and vulnerable. So in September of last year, we designated the first cohort of 483 community disaster resilient zones. And you see them spread across the nation. These are census tracts, right? So these are population-based. Some of these census tracts are densely populated. They appear as mere dots on this map. Others are very, very large because they're more sparsely populated, more rural. But what we see there is that 84% of these community disaster resilient zones, or CDRs as an acronym, have high social vulnerability ratings, and more than 3/4 of these zones that have been designated face 3 or more hazards that are rated as high or very high in the National Risk Index that we use for these designations. So the intent of the Community Disaster Resilient Zones effort is to direct with intentionality the provision of technical and financial assistance to those who are most at risk and in need. For FEMA, we're doing that through adjusting cost shares for some of our grant programs and providing additional technical assistance to help folks that may not even know where to begin in terms of going after accessing federal programs. But it's not just FEMA. Across the federal government, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Environmental Protection Agency, Department of Transportation, and more are going about their missions and their authorities to direct, again, technical and financial assistance into these zones where it can make the greatest difference. By just one example, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, is using its Green and Resilience Retrofits program to prioritize attention into these CDRs for a program that's aimed at strengthening the resilience and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions of our nation's public and multifamily housing. And that's just one example among many. And it's not just the federal government. The last thing I'll say about community disaster resilience zones is this. It is not just a program, it is a movement. It is a campaign. So we see action coming through philanthropic leaders, through the private sector, particularly insurance, reinsurance, the financial services sector, all gearing toward driving support into these among our most vulnerable and at-risk communities. Coming soon, we will be announcing the community disaster resilient zones for our nation's tribes as well as territories, and working with tribal nations in a co-designation approach. So more coming. There are going to be additional geographies that are going to be identified across this map. And of course, we'll also see designations for Alaska, for Hawaii, for our territories, and for tribal nations. So please stay tuned. We really encourage you to dig in and to also find ways to partner with these community disaster resilient zones through your work and part of your summer of action even. We also provide grant funding across the nation, of course, not just to CDRs. This is work we've been doing for generations around making communities more secure and resilient. So just last year, FEMA awarded more than $5.5 billion in non-disaster grant funding including $35 million through our Justice 40 covered programs that are designed to drive benefits directly to underserved and disadvantaged communities. This is all part of our FEMA strategic plan, where we are prioritizing climate resilience and work with disadvantaged communities, including increasing climate literacy, building a climate resilient nation, and empowering risk-informed decision-making. We're also developing national resilience guidance. This is intended to help all sectors and all disciplines, all levels of government, the private sector, nonprofit organizations, academia, communities, families, and even individuals to understand our nation's vision for resilience, the key principles that have to be applied across these efforts to strengthen resilience, and the roles and responsibilities that are necessary to enhance national resilience. Concurrent with all of these activities, we're working to strengthen climate literacy and resilience against the growing threat that the climate crisis is posing to communities across the nation and really around the world. So I want to draw your attention to a few of those resources now. The Climate Resilience Toolkit offers a framework to help communities systematically, methodically consider and understand and address their climate hazards. So communities can use this portal to understand past, present, and even future exposure to climate-related hazards. We're seeing planners, local project managers, and even property owners and folks that are considering buying their first home or where they're going to invest or where they're going to live, using some of these tools as best available federal information to understand their hazards that's in a single user-friendly tool. We also see people working with communities of faith and community organizations that can use this information to drive their prioritization and understand where there may be the greatest need, where they can be taking action to protect and prepare people and property and infrastructure. I also want to draw your attention to the Climate Risk and Resilience Portal, or CLIMER, because again, we need an acronym for everything. This tool is really designed to empower individuals, governments, and organizations to examine simulated future climate conditions at mid-century and even end-of-century conditions for a range of climate perils. This was developed in partnership with Argonne National Laboratories and AT&T and FEMA, coming together to build these tools to be able to have visualized projections of what risk can look like into the future. And then finally, the resilience analysis and planning tool. This is about giving everyone access to powerful data and GIS mapping that can help everyone understand the risks in their communities. It includes more than 100 preloaded layers, including community resilience indicators from peer-reviewed research, the most current census demographic data, infrastructure data, data on weather, hazards, and risk. It also includes easy to understand analysis tools and the ability to even add in data layer from other sources and to print and download this information. So these are the kinds of climate services and tools that are being deployed and even enhanced to help climate-informed decision-making and make this information more available and accessible to the full range of partners, including you all, community leaders, and houses of worship, and folks that are working to serve the needs of our disadvantaged communities. So this is all about accelerating the pace of resilience and action to confront the effects of climate change that we can no longer avoid. But I want to take some time now to talk with you about some specific programs that we have here at FEMA that are available to support faith-based and community organizations. One is the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. This is about providing funding for eligible hazard mitigation activities that protect life and property against future disaster damage. So nonprofit organizations, houses of worship and religious nonprofit organizations can be eligible for these hazard mitigation grants following a presidentially declared disaster. Hazard mitigation can include long-term efforts to reduce risk, including rebuilding stronger and using newer building codes and standards and rebuilding safer to enhance resilience overall. Additionally, following a presidentially declared disaster, the Individual Assistance Program can provide a variety of financial and direct assistance to states, tribes, local governments, and territory governments, as well as non-governmental organizations. So while the specific types of individual assistance that are available can vary based on the needs of the disaster, options can include community service financial awards, such as the Crisis Counseling Assistance and Training Program, as well as the Disaster Case Management Grant. So these financially awards can provide supplemental assistance for disaster-impacted individuals and communities. The Nonprofit Security Grant Program also provides funding support to target hardening and other physical security enhancements and activities for nonprofit organizations that can be at higher risk of terror attack. So the intent there is to integrate nonprofit preparedness activities with broader state and local preparedness efforts against these anthropogenic threats. It's also designed to promote coordination and collaboration in emergency preparedness activities among private, public, and nonprofit community leaders, state and local governments, and including houses of worship. And then finally, certain nonprofit organizations, houses of worship, and religious nonprofit organizations can be eligible for FEMA's Public Assistance Program following a presidentially declared disaster. Provided that those eligibility conditions are met, the funding providing under this program can address the costs for emergency protective measures, debris removal, repairing or replacing facilities that are damaged during a disaster. The final area that I want to speak with you about is in the area of training. This is where FEMA can provide numerous training and exercise opportunities for a range of community and faith-based organizations, including, for example, cultivating and managing volunteers, preparing for mass casualty events, addressing the needs of children, elders, and other vulnerable populations. Some of these other resources can include training on mobilizing faith-based community organizations and preparing for disasters. This is provided by the Rural Domestic Preparedness Consortium. This is an 8-hour planning and management level course that trains faith-based community organization representatives, management level emergency managers and first responders, all around strategic mobilization and engagement. And this can apply for churches, both affiliated and unaffiliated, across the range of faith communities, all towards strengthening local emergency management efforts. And then there's also a program called Building a Roadmap for Resilience, a whole community training. This is provided by FEMA. And through state, territory, and tribal training centers. This is an 18-hour course. This is an in-person course that focuses on implementing inclusive emergency management principles in local communities to increase resilience in the face of disasters. Now, I know I've covered a lot in a very quick period of time, so I'm going to be following up to provide links to this information and, of course, foster that ongoing relationship across our teams to make sure that you all have the information needed to do a deeper dive for your summer of action into the resources that I covered. But I'm going to bring us in for the finish here. Looking ahead, FEMA's capabilities to deliver products and services for communities really depend on our partnerships at all phases of disasters, before, during, and after, and through that important preparedness and hazard mitigation phase. So again, it's partnerships like this one that are incredibly valuable to us, that we know enable us to reach people where they are. At FEMA, we're also continuously evolving and growing the expertise and capacity necessary to provide support through states, local governments, tribes, and territories, and the public to address these increasing frequency and severity of extreme weather events. The Biden-Harris administration also is providing new opportunities and historic resources to address climate resilience across the nation, including through the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and a range of opportunities that can address things like low carbon construction materials, helping to cut carbon pollution and build back better, build back cleaner and more resilient. Additionally, our net zero energy projects are now applicable through FEMA's hazard mitigation grants and our public assistance grants. So working together, we are so excited about your summer of action and the way that that aligns with our year of resilience. So we're really keen to continue the partnership and really encourage you to be that advocate in your community, to share those opportunities for action and engagement across all the phases of disaster life cycles. Continue that important work of EEN through that environmental stewardship and the partnership around land conservation and nature-based solutions that we know is really essential, and that social cohesion and interconnectedness to create a resilient nation and protect creation. So I'll look forward to getting into any questions you may have and continuing our collaboration into the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you provided so many great tools. I look forward to seeing the links for that. So thank you. Appreciate that in advance. I had really considered asking how a church or faith community could get involved. I feel like you've answered that, but wondering if you have anything to add to that. You know, if we want to get involved with FEMA, how would a church or faith community do that?
Sure. Well, certainly there would be lots of follow-up and a lot of tools and resources coming your way for that deeper dive into that overview I provided. I would really encourage folks to also look at the community disaster resilience zones if you're looking for that first place to start, and where some of those zones may be within the communities that you serve. That's a great place to start as a kind of a laboratory for opportunities, since we've already identified those as being at that intersection of need and risk. Then other ways, I think, is really to see this as a very human business, right? So trust your instincts and bring this information across your communities, really recognizing that faith leaders are already trusted partners and can be such a great source of information about the anticipated risks that we know are coming through the coming season, and a very busy hurricane season, extreme heat, or other conditions that we know are going to be unfolding over the coming months. And really being that partner and that trusted voice, I think, is an essential place to start. But I'm also keen to continue to explore opportunities even beyond that with you all.
I appreciate that. I look forward to, I saw the training and things like that. Those sound like wonderful opportunities for people. So Bonnie Blessing asked a very specific question in the chat that's very specific to a place. So I'm wondering how you would recommend people that have questions like that would follow up with you or with others. It has to do with the watershed in Aberdeen, Wisconsin, and salmon and things that are all very important, but is very specific locally. Do you have a recommendation for how to follow up on that question?
Absolutely. And I'd be happy to also follow up offline. Across the nation, FEMA's regions are a great resource of that kind of being the front porch for FEMA. Now, certainly here at headquarters, working at that national level on national policy, we're very keen on watershed protection, on nature-based solutions, and the full range of opportunities to work across the interagency as well. And look at where FEMA's programs can intersect with other natural resource and watershed protection and habitat protection programs. But getting into these much more place-based efforts, this is where I want to connect you all with our FEMA region that can be providing the opportunity to build those relationships and again, kind of weave together where FEMA's programs can be working with other programs through state and local and regional initiatives. Our regions are the best front porch for that kind of effort, and I'd be really honored to help provide those introductions.
Wonderful, thank you. In the interest of time, we're going to move on. There's a couple other questions in the chat, but we'll make connections afterwards to get those answered. So at this point, if we can go back, first of all, I really want to thank you. Really enjoyed listening to your presentation and all the amazing things that you had to say. And I'm have watched from far away the work of FEMA for a long time, and I think resilience is so important. So I'm so happy that we have such a wonderful leader in that position. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you all. What a privilege and an honor and a blessing to be with you. I'm going to leave you all to your great continued meeting. Just really look forward to next steps and continued engagement with you all. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so to continue with the presentation today, that was wonderful. I wanted to talk a little about, we have, personal impacts and local impacts can really spur us on to local action. And I think that's a lot of what FEMA does is focus on local areas that have had issues, but not all of those warrant action from FEMA. And so those are places where we can step in. In terms of supporting your story, I think it's wonderful to start with what your story is and then also have facts and data to back that up. There are some wonderful resources that you can go to that talk about local data in terms of what is your air like in your area, how many cancer cases or asthma cases there are and things like that. This is a list of some of those resources that we go to often at EEN when we're starting to talk about local impacts. And we've put a link in the chat that has a link for you to go to resources that explains how you can use each of these and has links directly to pages that are helpful for local impacts. And so speaking of local impacts, I'm really excited to have Mike Armstrong from Cleveland, Ohio. I met Mike probably about 4 years ago and immediately knew that when we asked the question at the beginning, Mike has been doing this advocacy work for a long time. And at that point, I felt like a beginner, and it's been kind of fun to watch Mike in the last few months, do some very local advocacy. He's been spurred to action. And so I'm excited to have him tell his story about how he has taken action based on something local that has impacted him. So take it away, Mike.
Hi, everyone. Mike Armstrong, live in Cleveland, Ohio, in Cadell neighborhood. Lived before moving back here. We lived up in the Boston area for a number of years, and God got hold of me there, and here we are back in Cleveland. And just always love God's creation, trees, and green spaces, and that's just me. So my wife and I, we've been active like in our neighborhood block club. I've been working on sustainability issues in the local community. We were really got active here in becoming tree and park advocates with the loss of a community orchard that happened just down the street from us. That was sold to a developer for a very low price. However, that resulted in being invited to be a part of the councilperson's local tree advocacy steering committee. And that's where I learned about what was happening to my local park, Cadell Park, which was only a few blocks away from where I live. I learned that the park was going to be developed. Half the park was going to be developed. And the city council had given the land over to the school district to put a new building on. And the schools need, of course, a new building, but obviously there's better ways to do that. And there was no input from the community when that decision was made. But going back to the councilperson's tree committee, we learned oh, they're going to take down 40 trees too, including this beautiful bald cypress tree. And there was just something so wrong about that at so many different levels. And so we were told that it's too late, there's nothing that can be done about it. But a group of neighbors came together, and others that were here to advocate for our park. Again, that's Cadell Commons Park, and it was a historic park. It's been there for close to 100 years, and just kind of one thing leading to another. Actually, a lawsuit was filed against the city and the school system. We ultimately lost that suit, but it had taken close to 4 or 5 months for all of that to kind of work its way through the system. And a number of things changed. And there was just significantly more support in the community for saving the park, even among some of the public officials. And they began to understand how, removing a park contributes to higher asthma rates, air pollution. It increases the heat island effect. So if we're talking about climate change, is this really good for the community and for the kids where you'd put up a school building? I'm just going to check time here very quickly. Okay, so I'm right on track. I just wanted to say that it does raise questions of faith. If you're so upset with the city officials, but where does compassion come in, or kindness, or humility, and also patience? We've been asking to meet with the mayor for a long time because he could have a significant impact on that. And guess who we spoke to, a few of us last night? The mayor of Cleveland. And some of it was a bit of a struggle, just putting aside the tension and just how difficult a process that has been. But it went very well. And I should also say, ironically, this happened at a community meeting at a place called Forest City Brewery. So I was like, I think God's hands on this. And he said, we're working really hard. We're going to try to make something work out. So, I just want to say, if you're involved in advocacy in the community, just, understand also that we're dealing with people and also our neighbors, and just be as Christ-like and working through that's okay. I think in the end, in terms of our park, I just can't shake this feeling that something's going to work out, even though it's looked bleak for the last 6 months. But I just hope and pray it works out. I would just encourage you that, just sometimes you just have to work through something difficult, but to just kind of hang in there and persevere. So I thank the EEN for allowing me to share today. Very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing your story with us today of taking local action. And I'm just so heartened by your example of, as you said, perseverance. Do not grow tired, grow weary of doing good. And you are such a wonderful example of that, as well as breaking down that myth that what can one person do? But when we gather together in community for faithful and persistent action, changes can happen. And especially, we know we're not doing this work alone. We're doing it in partnership with God, our God, who is a God of restoration. And so, Michael, thank you so much for bringing this inspiring story for the rest of us as we look at, as Kim and Administrator Medlock have led us in, of discovering some of those local impacts. How are our own communities, family, friends, our households, our neighbors, how are they impacted by climate and pollution? And how can we get involved in creating that healthy and safe climate we all want to thrive in? And so that is what we are centered on here for our summer of action, to follow your lead, Michael, in taking action in the ways that we feel led to do, motivated to do, excited to do. And the thing is, and as you'll hear Kim say time and time again, there are so many different ways you can act. There's a whole menu and buffet of options. And so I'm really excited to share with you all some options for you to lift your voice, ways for you to lift your voice this summer. Sometimes it can feel, again, overwhelming and not sure where to start, what we can do. And this is where we at EN want to make this so easy for you, as we are looking at these high level, but also timely and opportune ways that you can lift your voice and advocate for solutions that defend life, protect God's creation, and create those family sustaining jobs. And so I just want to share with you a couple of opportunities that are in action and timely right now that we are working on at EN, and would love to resource you in lifting your voice for which ones you feel excited about, as well as discovering other ways together to act. And then I'm going to hand it off to our team to go through the different ways you can engage. But some of those timely opportunities that we are looking to resource you, come alongside you with this summer: supporting natural climate solutions and farmer-led conservation. Right now, the 2024 Farm Bill is being reauthorized. This is one of the most, this happens every 5 years. It's happening a little later this year than before, but it is one of the biggest investment in natural climate solutions and conservation, in one of these biggest opportunities that we have every 5 years. And so it's really critical to lend your voice to make sure that natural climate solutions stay centered and have dedicated resources in this important process. Many of you have also worked with us over the years to get new, strong pollution safeguards through the EPA and other agencies. And we have celebrated over this past couple months the finalization of several important new safeguards of protecting our air quality and our lives, our lungs, our children from soot pollution, methane pollution, carbon pollution from power plants, mercury and air toxics, as well as we're working on pipeline safety right now. There are efforts to roll back these important safeguards, and through what's known as the Congressional Review Act process, your policymakers hearing from you that we need to support these strong pollution safeguards, keep them in place, is so important. We have the opportunity to do that this summer. We also have opportunities to protect our public lands and national parks, as well as advocating for new national monuments. And then also, we've heard so much today about those local climate impacts through the Inflation Reduction Act that we heard from Administrator Medlock on, the bipartisan infrastructure law, things that you and the EN community have advocated for. Those solutions are now coming into place with new climate and clean energy benefits through tax credits, rebates. This summer, we'd love to come alongside you in exploring what are those local benefits, especially for households and your churches, that they can take advantage of. And so these are just a couple ways that we can act together, opportunities to lift your voice this summer. Now, this is the what. I want to step into the how. And there are many different ways that you can lift your voice. And I'm going to hand it over now to Tori Goebel, our national organizer and spokesperson for Young Evangelicals for Climate Action, but also an expert in how to talk about climate with our family, our friends, and know your climate story, which is really at the heart of all of our advocacy opportunities that we have for you today. I'll hand it over to you now, Tori, to lead us in this.
Thank you, Jessica. Social science tells us that one of the best things we can do for climate change is just to talk about it in our communities. However, as you might think, that can be stressful, that can be hard. And so we are going to be offering ways for you to learn about how to have these effective conversations. And this can take a few different forms. So you can engage with this by having meaningful conversations with friends, family, and folks in your church. And we'll be preparing you to craft your own personal creation care testimony that will serve as a foundation for other Summer of Action opportunities, as well as just a way for you to have conversations this summer and beyond. So for next steps, you are welcome to join us after this official webinar wraps up for an optional training on how to have these effective climate communications. And you can watch the recording later as well, and really use this to support your actions this summer and beyond, because all that you will be doing this summer will require you to have an idea of how to communicate why you care about this issue through the lens of your faith, and to utilize communications best practices. And so this will really hopefully set a solid foundation for the rest of the Summer of Action. And now I'll turn it over to Kim to share more about one way that this can take hold.
Yeah, one way that you can share your story is by writing a letter to the editor or an op-ed. And basically the difference is in letter to the editor is usually very short, and an op-ed can be a little bit longer. And some ways that you can start to get engaged is, first of all, gathering your local statistics, again, using the link that was shared earlier to resources that can help you find data about your locality. And then write in place op-eds. I just want to point out that this does get the attention of policymakers. We have a couple people who are actually joining us today who wrote to Sherrod Brown a year or two ago, or actually wrote a letter to the editor, and Sherrod Brown wrote them a handwritten note of thanks. And we have many stories like that for all of these different actions. So these actions do make a difference. So encourage you to find a way that you can get engaged this summer. But LTEs are one way. In terms of next steps, we will be having a session on June 20th, which will also be recorded, on how to write a letter to the editor or op-eds. There will be a link that we'll put in the chat that can help you find the contact info for editors near you. And if you decide to write a letter to the editor, you can send me a draft and we can take a look at it. And we have many opportunities that we'll talk about in more detail on June 20th. But one that's coming up sooner than that is to write a letter to the editor to support natural climate solutions in the Farm Bill conservation programs. So if you're interested in doing that now, send me an email and we can work on that together. And I will pass it over to Lindsay, who will talk about social media.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsay Garcia, and I'm the Director of Communications for EEN. And part of our work as our communications team is managing EEN's various social media accounts. Maybe you even heard about today's webinar through our social media. But the neat thing about these social platforms is that they're not just useful tools for organizations and companies, they're tools that almost all of us have access to, and we can use to make our advocacy more far-reaching and effective. So here are some of the ways that you'll be able to engage with social media throughout the Summer of Action. Our communications team will be putting together toolkits that help you amplify EEN's advocacy priorities. We'll also be sharing other content that you can in turn share, like published op-eds, LTEs, like Kim mentioned, and also posts that you can reshare that EEN is already sharing. You can also get more personal and use social media to share about your creation care story and values. And as Tori mentioned, we will learn more about that later on today. And we'll also show you how to get the attention of policymakers and other key decision makers on social media. So for next steps, if you sign up and indicate that you're interested in social media advocacy at the end of today's webinar, you will receive social media toolkits later on this summer and a video explaining how to use them if that's new to you. You can also make sure that you're following EEN on social media platforms that you're active on. If you don't follow us already, you can always find those links to follow us at the bottom of any emails that we send out, or also at the bottom of our website. And finally, social media can be a great way to highlight other actions that you're taking throughout the summer and sharing them with your friends and family so they can see what you're up to. So with that, I will pass it on to Carolyn Heckman, our Associate Director of Pennsylvania Policy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carolyn Heckman, and I just want to start off by saying your voice is a powerful way to engage. You can become an advocate via policy, and some PA policies of interest that are moving right now include press, community solar, solar for schools, and so much more. If you want to go to next steps, engaging on the state of local and state level includes an all the above approach, touching on social media, opinion editorials, letters to the editor, and meeting with policymakers, which Jessica will cover next. If you're interested in diving deeper in PA policy, join me on Wednesday, July 24th at 12 p.m. for the Lay of the Land Pennsylvania webinar. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Thanks, Carolyn. And as Carolyn said, at the federal level, we have the opportunity and want to facilitate you to get your voice heard directly to your policymakers here in Washington, D.C. Ways that you can engage this summer is by meeting with your policymakers. This is known to be one of the most effective ways to influence your policymakers. You as a constituent is one of the most influential people who they care and listen to. This provides you an opportunity to directly share what matters to you in your local community across our country and around the world. And again, you are the expert in what matters in your state and district. Your leaders know this and they want to hear from you. And so this summer, we will have the opportunity to facilitate you to meet virtually with your representatives and senators. And I have to say, it's never been easier because we have this virtual option. So how can you engage with next steps? Sign up. Sign up for meeting with your policymakers as an option for this summer of action. We will host a training opportunity on June 7th at noon, if this is of interest to you. And then we will come alongside and help schedule and walk you through every step of the way with a virtual meeting with your policymakers. And so I want to hand it back to Kim, who will share with us how you can sign up for these several opportunities that we have for you this summer. Over to you, Kim.
Yes, so we've done Summer of Action for several years, and one thing we want to really do this year is have somebody that's dedicated to each of these different types of actions that will follow up with you. So in order to get that list, what we'd like you to do is use the QR code or the link that's being put in the chat to sign up for one or more of these options. And then the person that has done the presentation on that action today will follow up with you for opportunities throughout the summer. And also just want to, if we can go to the next slide, encourage you to attend the training sessions that are coming up over the summer, especially for an area that you are interested in. Like if you're interested in social media, attend that session, or there's a video in a toolkit. If you want to meet with your policymaker, there's a session. So here's the schedule, and you can easily register for one or all of these at creationcare.org/summer. And then a couple of opportunities that are coming up that are related is we have a pipeline. We're learning about methane pipeline leaks at a session next Wednesday that will be co-led by EEN, Moms Clean Air Force, the Pipeline Safety Trust, and Health First PA. There's a pipeline rule that is out, and we'll learn more about that there. And then another opportunity that I mentioned earlier is if you are interested in writing a letter to the editor to support natural climate solutions in Farm Bill conservation programs, you can send an email to me at kim@creationcare.org. And then finally, we've had a wonderful book club over the last few years, and our great communications team has created these wonderful and beautiful resources for if you want to go through a book by yourself, or you want to take your church or some of your neighbors through it. On our website, you can find guides now that will help you walk them through reading these books together. So you can find that at creationcare.org. So that wraps up the first portion of our session today, and just want to thank you. And in a moment, we'll close in prayer, but we also will have a little bit of time this afternoon, immediately after this, to listen to Tori talk about how to share stories with your family and friends about creation care. So if you have time today, you can hang on for that. And if you don't, then we will have a recording and you'll receive the link by email where you can listen to that at a later date. So I will close us in prayer, and then we'll take about a 5-minute break. Dear God, thank you so much for this time today, and just pray that it has been glorifying to you, and that I just pray that for each person on this call, that they will be in prayer about what it is that you want them to do throughout the summer in terms of ways of taking action. And we just thank you for being a glorious God. It's in your name we pray. Amen.